Hello and welcome back. We are Outside the Box. This is our podcast we use to drive our performance in and around the city of Sugar Land. I'm your host, Kevin, and I am very fortunate to be joined by a special guest today, Kathie Leverence. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Kathie joined us a while ago, maybe about a year ago, episode 3. Take a look back at it, where we talked about some strategies for developing critical thinking and how we get better at problem solving. And we're going to revisit that general topic today, but some different ways to approach critical thinking, problem solving, and becoming more functional adults. So Kathie, thanks for joining us today. Why don't you give us a recap of some of your professional background that you're bringing into this conversation today?
All right. So I am in public education. So I've been a teacher in multiple grade levels in multiple states. I've been a coach working with mostly adults, but also students, and then I'm currently an administrator in a large public school system. So I get to work with kids on a daily basis. I work with adults on a daily basis. There's a lot of similarities between kids and adults as well as differences. So my experience has been varied.
Excellent. And you and I get to have these conversations pretty regularly about the similarities between the things that we do, that while we are in very different environments professionally, the interpersonal things are there, the leadership, instructional components are there, and like you had said, the similarities between adults and children, this is like human beings, that we're developing the human brain, and I guess it doesn't matter which professional field you go in, it's still the same human brain, it's just different context.
Still developing both student and adult learners in both our fields.
I like it. Give us your perspective on why this is important. Why should we be putting attention towards developing critical thinking in the first place?
So we hear that from our stakeholders, period, whether it's parents or just business community stakeholders. They're not looking for people who can answer facts. They're looking for students to become adults who can think critically, who can think outside the box, who become new learners. Our world just changes so rapidly. There's not time to memorize everything anyways. And, you think about us being kids, that we were told there's never not going to have a calculator all the time, but here we do. We can look up things all the time. So it's a matter of taking that knowledge, applying it, being able to sift through what is good information and what's not good information is also part of critically thinking.
Less about memorizing, more about how to use.
More about applying, yes.
And you and I talk about it too. Let's not dismiss memorization of some things is crucial, that is important. And that was the discussion we had last year of these levels of knowledge and questioning, that some things you do need to memorize. And you can't use the information in a functional way if you don't know it. So we can't just skip right to that higher level of functioning. We need to have the base underneath it.
Absolutely. If you think about it from like a math teacher's perspective, sure, we have calculators in our pockets, but at the same time, those second, third grade students need to memorize those basic multiplication facts where they're not going to be able to apply that basic knowledge going further. Now, do we need to memorize area? Probably not. We can pull out our calculators and we can work those out.
And when we roll this stuff in, I love having discussions with you because of childhood education, that somehow adult education, we shift it and make it totally different, and you just sit there and I talk at you, and that's what we call education. And I think we experience that a lot in EMS because we follow the example of physicians, that those are the highest level of clinical providers we can model after. And those college-educated professionals sat in lecture halls and they were lectured at, but then they also got the benefit of residency, where they spent years of on-the-job training, being developed and coached very closely. And even in education, you get time student teaching, where you're in the classroom being very closely mentored. We don't really get a lot of that. Paramedic school is a very short internship, considering the expectations we're supposed to meet. So here's our opportunity to kind of remodel that and get our people some better development and growth and getting there. So we referred back to the last time we talked, these depth of knowledge levels. Can you give us just a quick recap on those levels and what they are?
Sure. We had the 4 levels, the depth of knowledge, where we start your level 1 working up through 4, and 1's just your memorization, math facts, state capitals, true, false questions, where there's just one right answer. And they progress to why is that the right answer, kind of being level 2. 3 is even more critically thinking. It's kind of that sweet spot of where we want most of our questioning. 4 becomes an application piece where you're really creating and taking all these pieces of knowledge and you're creating something completely different and applying it somewhere else. So really with our day-to-day, 2s, 3s is where we kind of want to spend most of our time to get the most bang for our buck.
Yeah, and I went and recapped some of our discussion as we talked about it pertaining to clinical practice, that level 2 questions were, I have a couple different medication choices that are both appropriate, all appropriate. I choose this one because of these things. Here's the evidence that supports that being the choice I'm going to go with. And level 3 being more of the kind of the differentiating between a patient presentation and making sense of it, putting context to it, and then being able to make the level 2 decisions of this medication versus that one. Right? So we really want to live in this level 3, like you said. I feel like in clinical practice, even as we're operating on any kind of emergency scene, we're kind of living in that level 3, that we go on a major vehicle crash on the highway and there are some rescue needs and some hazards that are present. There's some of that lower level knowledge. The book says, here's how you handle that thing. But there's a lot of critical thinking, prioritizing what need to happen first, and a lot of figuring it out, right? And I feel like that's where we are with this level 3, maybe even to some level 4 on a bigger scale. But, right, would you agree with that kind of thing, that that's where you're figuring it out?
Yes. And I know, you referenced your shorter period for paramedics. We have student teachers, but there's still a lot of figuring it out, even once you get into the profession.
Absolutely. 20 years later, here we are.
You're still figuring it out.
Right. So let's focus on this area where there's not the single right answer, and there's more appropriate responses, and it's not necessarily listed in the book in this level 3. And today we're going to talk about a new to us, a different approach on how we can foster growth and development at that critical thinking level. Tell us about it.
So we've talked a lot about discourse, and what that is essentially is just allowing people to talk, to have discourse. So when you've got these great planned questions and they're going to, push your learners to think more critically and apply what they know, we want to give them the opportunity to talk to each other. Because if I just throw a question out there and now I'm just going to cold call somebody, if I don't know the answer, I'm, looking at my phone. I'm now going to leave and use the bathroom. I'm going to avoid eye contact. I'm going to try and escape you. And my focus is on, please don't call on me. Whereas if I build in these opportunities to talk to each other, we see this frequently in our classrooms, it allows the kids and adults to not only bounce ideas off it, but if I have no idea what you're talking about, I now can listen, and I am now learning. Instead of heading off to pretend I need to answer a phone call, I'm now going to actually learn what this means and then can start thinking about how I can apply it to me.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some more of these specific examples and what that looks like. But that lends into our conversation we'd had previously about this affective filter theory. And maybe I'm simplifying it, but my understanding is that that's just like scared to engage.
So we talk about it a lot with our teachers. We have a high EB population here, which is our emergent bilingual. It's our students learning English as a second language. So when we talk about the affective filter and lowering that, we're typically talking about those, but we can take those ideas and apply it to all learners. So the idea is that we've made it more comfortable for you to make mistakes. So we can do that through, I, as much as anybody, hate icebreakers. I think every adult does, but does it kind of lower your anxiety when you've gotten to talk to somebody in just a very informal way? Yes, it lowers that affective filter for our kids as well. That's why we do so many at the beginning of a school year. You're creating a new community. You can do the same thing by putting people in groups when they're doing these discussions, because now it's not so scary if I'm talking to a group. Another simple way we do that is share what your partner told you. I don't even have to share what I shared now. I can share what somebody else said, and if they're wrong, it wasn't me. So it's just a way to make it less scary, essentially. And even our adults, that sometimes you're uncomfortable, and it makes it more comfortable, and you're more likely to engage in the learning then.
Okay. And I like the expression of getting comfortable being uncomfortable, that you go put 20 kids in a classroom, there might be some discomfort with that. Like that's a volatile situation. It could go well. It could not go well. Who knows how these kids are going to be today. And even great classroom management comes into this. Like, little humans they're humans. The human factor of anything makes it unpredictable. And we talk about this in an educational sense and reducing this inhibition to the learning process. But I see that tying right into what we do in any of our emergency operations and in our clinical practice, that if I'm scared to make a decision and engage in the decision process in clinical interventions, then nothing's happening. And we'll get to that whole discussion about that kind of paralysis and being unable to make a decision. But the same thing goes for the crash on the freeway, that the hazards still exist whether I decide or not. And the same thing with the fire, that if we have that fear, we have that effective filter, in essence, that I'm scared of doing the wrong thing, engaging in the wrong thing, not making the right decision. All right. So this is an opportunity to really reduce that, to get more comfortable being uncomfortable, to expand the comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Really, because we function outside the comfort zone. That there's not going to be a comfort zone. And I sit at my desk and work. I listen to the radio, and the call comes in for something. And Scott over here can back me up too, that how many times you show up and it's not what you were called for to begin with, or it takes a hard right turn from what it was originally, and we just need to be adaptable and be able to make these critical thoughts and this problem solving. So what does it look like? How do you, as an educator, program discourse into a lesson?
So it's not to oversimplify it, but you take those questions we talked about last time and you pre-plan them, because discourse isn't just, well, talk to your neighbor, because kids or adults, if you're just like, well, turn and talk to your neighbor, it's going to be, what did you do over the weekend? Or you're just going to, you're going to discuss whatever you're going to discuss, unless the teacher happens to walk by you, then you're like, wait, what are we supposed to be doing? But you put those questions out. It helps both adults and kids to have them posted, that here's what we're discussing amongst your group. Here are the things. You can put it with a group paper, like have a scribe. So somebody who's still not going to be comfortable talking, okay, you can be the one who's writing. You're still learning, you're still engaging, but it is planned. It's not just an open-ended, oh, we just talk to talk.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some specific examples, I guess, of questions in a minute. But to refer back to Ms. Perry coming in to visit with us and talk about this intentionality going into planning and being deliberate, she talked about grouping people together, that the groups going together are deliberate and purposeful, and where the old model was you group by similar ability. And we kind of related that here of a similar experience level, that you have less than 2 years, here you go, you're a group. You have more than 20 years, you're a group. And some of the actual drawbacks of that, instead, we get more benefit out of mixing these experience levels and these ability levels. Can you tell us more about that you see in the classroom with taking different ability levels into groups?
So when you mix up your ability levels, it gives our higher level learners a little chance to be more leaders, more classroom led, more student led. But it's not the blind leading the blind. Because if I put everybody who doesn't know how to do something together, nobody's doing anything now. Whereas if I have some who are in the middle, some who are at the top, some who are at the bottom, and now I've gotten, like, if you think of it like a rising wave raises all ships, you pull that string up, all the learners are going to go. So even if I'm meeting my higher learners, the ones who are a little bit lower are going to go right along with them, as opposed to if nobody knows what to do, now we're just going to make up whatever it is, and nobody's learned anything today.
Yeah. And we're already set this way, that you get into the station and you sit at the kitchen table and you already have a mixed ability group. Mm-hmm. You have the more senior folks, you have the young folks, and don't discount the benefit of that mix. That coming up, I had a station captain that I didn't work directly for, would work on these extra shifts with him, and it was his MO that the youngest guy, here's this, teach us something. No, by the way, no prep, no warning. If you know your stuff, you can teach it right now. So just, there you go, teach us. We're all going to sit here and listen to you talk. Phenomenal learning environment.
Sounds intimidating.
Right? But nobody else with all of the experience and having tried all the things with this equipment was not sharing any of this knowledge. It was the kid who has passed some tests out of a book and didn't have the experience piece to it and couldn't speak to this higher level stuff. You walk into the station and you already have this mixed group. And my example is tying a bowline knot. The bowline is my thing, that I don't know how many times somebody tried to teach me this knot, I couldn't do it. And it was actually one of my partners in Aurora. He's like, try it this way, and that's the way that's stuck. And I'm sure there's many of other experiences that somebody's tried to explain something to us and it just won't stick. You're like, I don't get it. I'm not sure. And then there's somebody that comes along and explains it a different way, uses different language, the lunar cycles the right way that day, whatever, and it sticks. So again, this is our opportunity, that if you as the instructor are explaining it in a way that isn't really resonating. I understand these words, but it's not really sinking in. And I get with my group and somebody has a different way of looking at it. That might be the perspective I need. But now I've learned in this small group, and that other person with the experience, with the knowledge, they've had to know it enough to be able to convey it, which is another level of learning also. So you get these groups, you get these partners. Something we are challenged with in my industry, when you talk about these questions, you package them, you prepare them to facilitate discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a difficult thing for us in emergency services that I can package a group discussion question,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to be a closed answer. I'm looking for this one thing, and I'm going to keep you talking until you get to the thing I want you to say. Instead of us as facilitators, leaders, instructors being comfortable not answering the question, that if the question is whatever it may be, that I don't necessarily have a specific answer in mind that I'm looking for. Instead, the objective is you have an approach to it that's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
This group has an approach to it that's appropriate. Now turn to each other and discuss what differences there are, what complications come out of this approach that you're anticipating, so on and so forth. Any thoughts on packaging these questions? Like, was this a challenge for you as an educator to be able to throw a discussion question and not have it? I think I'm just rambling about it now, but that's what we do, is that as an instructor, as an example, I'll say, let's talk about pain management. What's appropriate pain management for this person? And in my mind, I want you to say 100 micrograms of fentanyl. And until you say 100 micrograms of fentanyl, we're, quote, discussing, but you're not getting to my one right answer. Instead of what's appropriate pain management, in these three groups, I'll come up with 3 appropriate responses and they can compare their answers. How long did it take? Was it a challenge for you to get to that point of students are going to give you different answers and you're okay with different answers?
I think it's easier as a elementary teacher to be okay with different answers because students will give you things out of left field all of the time. Like, that doesn't even make sense why we're talking about your cat now. And you have to get good at redirecting. Because when you are doing these conversations, you're putting out these group discussions, you're not so much the one with the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one facilitating thinking and asking probing questions. Again, even if you're trying to guide somebody, if I just give you the answer, you're not going to know how you got there. It's just, well, that was the right answer. I guess I'll write it down.
Mm-hmm.
But asking those questions of, how did you get to that? Have you thought about this? Maybe somebody came up with an answer. It's, well, have you thought about allergic reactions? And it's, oh, no, I didn't. Okay, so what else could you try if the person has an allergic reaction to this? Oh, I could come up with that. Or having your groups, if I've got 2 different answers, it's a, why did you choose this over that? And letting them talk to each other. So it's not so much having the correct answer as it's guiding those discussions to, again, get people to think more critically about why they chose it. Not just, well, that's what my group chose and I'm just the spokesperson. It's, okay, let's defend our answers.
You see benefit to even an introduction to this being assigning a response. That if we talk about comparing these medication options, group A, here is the option you're going to plan out and discuss so that you can pair it with group B's response, which is this. And instead of you finding that answer that you then find information around, is that a decent enough introduction, or have we taken away the benefit of?
No, because you can talk about, okay, here are your 3 choices. Group A, you're going to talk about why you would or not use this, why it is the best choice or it's not the best choice. B, same thing, and then C, and see which each group comes up with. Like I said earlier, we see some of our teachers do that, where it's, let's talk about this question in the reading passage. The class has decided C is the correct answer. Well, now we're going to go back and we're going to talk about why you didn't choose A, and trying to backtrack on that. So it could be simple as that. Here are your 3 choices. Oh, we think it's all going to be the 3rd choice. This one's going to talk about why you didn't pick A. This one's going to talk about B, and that one's going to talk about C.
Excellent. And I think we do some of this already without realizing. I think we're kind of doing it. But in my mind, I have the right answer. So I'm going to give you things to think about critically, quote unquote, as long as you arrive at my answer. And one of our classic examples, I think, is which hose you select to approach this fire. And there will forever be the unending debate of smooth bore versus fog nozzle. and we don't need to get into the right answer that I have in my mind. But we regularly do that. We carry both of these nozzles because they serve different purposes. There's benefits on each end of it. And what we do now as an example is I say, Kathie, here's this situation. Which hose line do you pick? I know which one I want to pick. I want you to arrive at my answer. So we step into it the right way, but then we kind of lose the benefit because I have my answer. Instead of it being, what would you choose? Why would you choose that? Have you considered these drawbacks of that choice? And your response being, yes, I would do these things to navigate the drawback of that. I think we're there. I think we're almost there. We know how to step into it, but then we don't fully step in. We're kind of an ego-driven industry. We like our answers. We like being right. Nobody really likes being wrong.
No, we all like to be right.
But maybe you can validate this part, is that just because somebody has a different answer doesn't make that answer right and your answer wrong.
Correct. So we already talked about those different levels don't have necessarily a correct answer. Right. It's just based on situations, experiences. Hose nozzles, it might be comfort level. And if I can control this one better, I'm going to use this one better for this situation. But that's different than person A versus B's experiences. So we have to be okay with not every answer may be what I would choose, but can that person defend why they would do it?
And in our previous discussion, we talked about drilling into bones, our IO access, that we have a couple different places. And depending on the situation, people prefer one over the other. And I like to focus on the objective of getting the access. We need effective access, that I don't necessarily need one over the other. There's benefits of this one versus that one. This one has benefits that one doesn't have. And again, that being the response of, what did you choose and how come you chose that? And as long as that's what got me to good access, that's an appropriate answer. What hose line did you choose? This one, because of these things to accomplish these goals. Okay.
Well, as a facilitator, it's not about being right. It's about teaching people how to come to those conclusions, because you're not going to run every call with these crews. They're not going to call you every time we need to make a decision. They need to be able to make a decision with the information they have at that time and then be able to defend why they did it.
Love it. And just to bring it all back to the EMS stuff, we talked about case studies being a phenomenal, case reviews being a phenomenal tool for practicing this critical thinking. And to get more specific with it isn't just, here's a case, what would you do? That's a pretty big project there. But again, these intentional planned ones, that here's this patient's presentation, here's a limited amount of information. What are your treatment priorities? What are your diagnostic priorities? What needs an intervention right now? And what do you need to know more about? And making it a smaller package. And then great, we talked about that. We have a discussion. We compare some of these viewpoints that people come up with. Right now we're starting to talk about medication interventions. Here's the 4 medications that are appropriate for this case. Let's have this discussion on what priority they are, what changes we anticipate to see. So it's not just here's this whole package go, that we can chunk up a clinical case like we talked about, take a chart, and here's the initial impression, initial steps to this. And then here's further diagnostics is another opportunity for this kind of discourse, and ongoing treatment being another opportunity for discourse. And just to throw it at y'all while you're there, post RSI management, the guidelines list a handful of medication options for keeping patients comfortable. The goal is to keep them comfortable while they're paralyzed. There's 3 different choices listed. It's about understanding what each of them does and what's appropriate for that situation. There's a fun little discussion. Have that one. But the same thing goes as we talked about with fires too, that it doesn't have to be run an A to Z scenario while we're sitting at the table, that it's, here's a picture of a house. There you go. Here's some points on what are you concerned about? What are your hazard priorities in this kind of structure? A drill I used to love doing when I was driving was apparatus placement. That here's an address. Drive us there, Kathie. Where are you going to park the truck? Why'd you park the truck there? What are the problems with parking the truck there? What do you think about parking the truck over there? What kind of things happen? Are we on the right track with some of these things? Like, are we in the right direction?
Yeah, and I think with those kind of smaller drills pieces, you give people a chance whether to be successful in small, so they're willing to go further with their knowledge, but also practicing that like fail forward. I like how it was, what are the problems with this? You're doing it in a non-emergent time, so it's easier to talk through. Emotions are a lot lower. So that way, when you get into those heightened states, somebody's house is actually on fire, you're able to think through like, oh, I thought of this during practice. Oh, I thought of that. Didn't think of that. And even if you still make the wrong decision, you've made the best decision you can with the information you have because you've practiced that.
How do you see this tying into your responsibility as a leader? That we talk about this in the classroom and how to package this for students. How do you see this tying into your leadership responsibilities as an administrator?
Well, as an administrator, we have a large school. Each classroom is made up very, very differently. So what works for one fourth grade class isn't going to work for another fourth grade class. So that's teaching our teachers how to set their own students up to think based on the information they have about those students or those kids in their classroom. So a lot of times when our teachers plan together, it's hey, we're discussing, inferring. My class is not here. My class is ready for more. So, okay, we're still discussing the same ideas, but this group's going to take it a little further where this class is going to still be building that foundation. So it's really too about, as a leader, trusting the people I have in classrooms, that they are the experts on not only their kids, but their content areas, and then trusting them that they know their TEKs, they know their kids, they're going to build those kids in a successful environment. That just as you can't go on every call, I can't go teach all of these students in the building. I have to trust that my teachers are doing the best they can because they are the best ones for those jobs.
I find just spending time with these people is like the first leadership step of that, right? Like you put deliberate effort into them, but I guess you got to see where they are too, so you know where to get them and build them.
Yes, and absolutely. And we can't be experts in everything. So that's why we learn from each other, right? I've gone in classrooms and be like, wow, this teacher totally knocked it out of the park with this. This teacher's struggling a little bit with it. She needs to go see that teacher because this teacher is doing it. Like they're the ones in the classroom. They're the ones making it happen. Just like, all your structure fires don't go by the book. Kids don't follow the book either. So when you go in there, you're like, wow, I had this great idea and it didn't work, but I have another teacher who's rocking it. Let's go learn from her. And that can go between grade levels. I've had older grade level teachers go down to my pre-K because nobody walks quieter in that hallway than pre-Kers. So if you can get a whole bunch of 4-year-olds to walk quietly in the hallway, let me see how you're doing it.
I think an inhibition to us in our industry with this, right, is again back to this ego thing that I've been here the longest or I'm the highest ranking. I should have all the answers. I should know all this stuff. And I'm not sure where we as an industry, made that a thing. But to your point that you make regularly, that if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find a new room. So to be challenged by somebody with less seniority or less time, I guess those are the same, that isn't high as rank as you, isn't a commentary on your ability or your intelligence. In fact, it's a really good opportunity to learn because the world evolves, the world changes, our industry changes. And if a lieutenant can learn something from a firefighter, from a driver, like, shouldn't you? Like, again, that goes, I think, into some of this critical thinking that at the very least it challenges you to think about what you know. And maybe I don't know it the way I did, or maybe what I did know is no longer pertinent. Maybe that has changed. That we talk about changes in building construction from what it was just from when I started to what some of the lightweight stuff is now. That I can't go off of the first things I learned in building construction because I will get stuck in a house collapse, hoping that it holds up the way it used to. Don't worry, I won't. I'll come on. I'll be good. Okay. So there goes that effective filter in my mind. That kind of brings me back to that concept that I'm a little uncomfortable with you knowing something I don't know because I've been here longer, so I should know more than you. And it's not about a more or less, better. It's okay not knowing everything, and it's okay realizing that somebody else can teach you something. Right?
And we talk about like mixed ability grouping within students, but also applying your mixed ability grouping as a workforce, that I don't need my entire fourth grade team to all be exactly the same. I don't need you all to have the same strengths because then you all have the same weaknesses. So I personally like working with people who have my opposite strengths because then I can learn from you. If I'm already good at something, that's not an area I'm looking to improve on at that moment. It's how do I improve on this? So when we think about our mixed ability, just period, we want to learn from each other, and we have to just check your egos. I think teachers are good about that because our world changes so fast. We can't possibly keep up with everything. But if you can bring this and I can bring this and this person brings this, all together we can create something really amazing for our students.
So if we want to get better, be open to the learning process.
Well, absolutely.
Reduce that filter that it's going to be uncomfortable that somebody else teaches you something. But like, who else are you supposed to learn from? It's the whole iron sharpens iron concept that you've got to go around somebody who's going to challenge you if you're going to grow. You're right. If you smartest one in the room, need to find another room. Strongest one in the room, find another room. That you're not challenged at that point. So there's always a bigger room to go find. So go, metaphorically speaking, go find that room and get into that room. And we can facilitate that in our firehouses very easily. That, I mean, we sit at the table and drink coffee and solve all the world's problems. We have all the answers. That's a great opportunity to talk about something from last tour or from yesterday, or this thing happened last night. Let's play some of the what ifs. And here's a what if. You guys think about it there. You guys think about it there. And just the value of the perspective comes in, that somebody with a couple of years has a much different perspective than the person that's been driving for the last 15 years, compared to the person who drove for 15 years and now is a company officer, to the young company officer that, because of a younger organization, they advanced a little bit quicker. That so much value in it. And again, the ego-driven part is like, I don't want to look foolish and I don't want to be wrong.
Well, and you break that, like you talk these scenarios, and it doesn't have to be giving all the information. It's as simple as, here's what you have so far. What's your next step? What else do you need to know? So your more senior people are probably already thinking like, I need to know what this looks like, or I need to know this, or how this is presenting, where somebody else might not be thinking that yet because they've never seen a scenario like that.
And I'm going to use your example that you brought up in our conversation the other day, because it was phenomenal, and I don't think I could come up with a better one. That we say we're going to this address for this type of incident, and this is the third or fourth time we've been there this month. And we have the young person that it's, well, here's what they called for. We're going to deal with these things, where your senior people are thinking four or five times, like, why am I here so much? What's a bigger cause to this? And what's the real story going on? And not just this person has hip pain because they fell. Well, no, here's the bigger issue. And I thought that was a phenomenal example of that just the different perspectives that they come into. And that's how you make this younger person think of it a little differently. And then maybe this older person that it's, no, you're getting a little focused in on the 5 times here and not some of these other needs. And we get to balance these different perspectives and viewpoints. Kathie, is there anything else that you wanted to throw in here that you didn't get to mention as part of our discussion today?
Gosh, I don't think so, Kev. I think we have covered it all.
I want to close with just the big re-emphasizing point that when you're facilitating these discussions, you're not the answer giver. Like, don't worry about giving the answer. That the goal is to make people talk and compare their ideas. And maybe it would serve us that you talked about students coming out of left field with wild answers. Firefighters may do the same, perhaps. You talk about redirection. It takes practice to get good at redirection. Well, at least like give us that comfort that somebody's going to get in there and it's going to be, what the hell was that answer? You know who I'm talking about. Yeah, right. And then it's not just a natural thing to be like, oh, yes, that's okay. Come on back in. But it's a pertinent part that just because we're getting people to compare ideas doesn't mean you get to be way off base.
Right. No. And there's a difference between the 5-6-year-old being way off base versus the 25-26-year-old being way off base, but still bringing that in of, why do you think that? How did you come to that? That might be a teachable moment later that we need a little more in-depth conversations on this because you were not even close, but that's okay. Because if you were just talking at people, would you even know that person was totally lost? No, you wouldn't. So now it's at least bringing them in, hopefully in a caring way, to be like, you're very off base. Let's discuss this before you are put in a situation where you are also putting somebody's lives or property at jeopardy because you don't understand. So it kind of helps identify your outliers as well, that, oh, maybe we need a little more one-on-one time with this one.
Excellent. Don't have to have all the answers when you're facilitating.
Shouldn't have all the answers.
Should not. Oh, I like it. Shouldn't have all the answers. The goal is to make people talk, because the person talking, the people talking, are the people learning. And this is our opportunity to get a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable with things we don't know or ideas that we're not
familiar yet with.
Really,
Yes.
I like it. Kathie, thank you so much for coming in, having this discussion, and bringing some of our outside discussions here to share with everybody else.
Absolutely.
I look forward to the next time we get to have you in.
Me too.
Thanks for listening in, and we will catch you for the next one.